Hi everyone, we're on chapter 7 and this is about algebra formulas and equations. Now, we started with some formulas back in chapter 6, so you have had a little bit of practice on some of the things that we will be doing, but we'll go into more detail and depth, I guess you would say. So if you take a look at this first formula, we're going to substitute for L and for W. So let's put our numbers in. L is 7.5 and W is 5.0, but we can just put 5. We're multiplying L times 2, so I'm going to just use the little times symbol. And then we're adding that to 5. So 7.5 plus 5 would be 12.5. And then I'm putting it putting that number next to the parentheses. 2 times 7.5 would be 15, and then we're adding 5. So we have 12.5 times 20. And remember, you're going to show the substitution, show some steps. You can just use your calculator for a lot of this, but you still have to show some of the work that's involved in getting the answer. So that is 250 square feet, or we can write that as feet squared. Now you actually have to do some figuring on how do I label this. So if we look at this, we're taking feet plus feet, and then we're multiplying it times feet. Feet times feet is feet squared. So that's how you come up with your unit in this particular case. Okay, so for this one, we're going to substitute 2 for A, and we're taking that to the second power, or we say that is 2 squared. We're taking 1 to the second power, or 1 squared. So that would be 4 plus 1 in the parentheses, which gives us a 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Now, how do I label this one? Well, whenever we took 2 to the second power, we took 2 centimeters to the second power. So that would be 4 centimeters squared. And then we were adding it to 1 centimeter squared. All right. So that's plus 1, and it is centimeters squared, because 1 times 1 is just 1. And then we added that and multiplied it by 2, so our unit would be centimeters squared. Now this one gets a little tricky, and I'm going to explain the units at the end. Okay, so let's write this out. D is 9 pounds per cubic inch. We're going to take A times C. So I'm actually going to use brackets on this one. It's 6.3 times 2.7, because I'm going to use some parentheses for the multiplication. We're taking pi times r squared, and r is 2. And then we're going to take that times h, and h is 1.0. All right, so then we just go through and do all of our calculating. That's going to be 9 times 6.3 times 2.7 is going to be 17.01. And then that is pi times 4. So pi times 4 is 12.56. And we're multiplying that times 1. So we could really kind of drop that, but we need it to figure out our units. So I'm going to leave it on there for that reason. And on this, oh yeah, by the way, on pi we were using 3.14, so I probably should write that as 3.14. So you remember that you're not using the pi key in this case. So 3.14 times 4 is the 12.56. And then we have 9 times 4.45 when we do that subtraction times 1. So we got 40.05. We were rounding to the nearest whole number. I'm going to do the wavy equal signs. That means approximately. Now, this happens to be 40 pounds. But how did I determine that that was pounds? That is a little bit tricky. So if you look at this, we were multiplying inches times inches. And then 2 squared would also be inches by inch, right? Inches squared. And then when we subtract, we still have inches squared. So this is inches squared. So basically we had 9 pounds per cubic inch. And we multiplied that times square inches. And then last, the 1 is in inches, so that was, we multiplied it by inches. So I'm just using this to show you that we actually on top, we had inches cubed, cubic inches, which cancels that out and leaves us with pounds. So that's one of the more complicated ones on figuring out your unit. All right, here's our next example of a formula. It's a pretty messy formula. So let's get everything substituted in. All right, so V equals 1/3 times H, which is 12. And then I'm going to use brackets again because we're multiplying. It just helps with organization. Okay, so this is a subscript telling us that we have 2 A's. One is a subscript of 1, the other one's a subscript of 2, and that's how we can know the difference between the two. So A sub 1 is 100, A sub 2 is 196, and then we're going to multiply that by the square root of A sub 1 times A sub 2, so 100 times 196. Okay, so then we just have quite a bit of calculating to do. 1/3 of 12 is 4, so we can go ahead and figure that. 100 plus 196 is 296, plus the square root of 19,600. Okay, we can kind of drop the brackets and just use parentheses here. So now we have 4 times 296 plus 140. So 4 times 436. And that gives us 1744. And it is inches cubed. So in this multiplying, right, H was in inches, A sub 1 was in square inches, right? A sub 2 was in square inches. And so whenever we are multiplying square inches by inches, we get inches cubed. And then don't get too tangled up in the square root part of it, but our unit is inches cubed. I'm talking about for the units on that. Don't get confused there. Okay, so this one is an application problem. In machine trades, the volume of a round steel bar depends on its length L and diameter D according to the formula V equals D squared times L, all divided by 4. Find the volume of a bar 20 inches long and 3 inches in diameter. Use pi equals 3.14 and round to the nearest 10 cubic inches. All right, so L is 20.0 inches and D is 3.0 inches. Sometimes it's good to identify these things, especially with a word problem. You also could use some highlighting here, and don't forget that we're going to use 3.14. Right, this is our diameter, and then this was our length. All right. So in our formula, we're going to have 3.14 times 3 squared times 20, and then we divide that by 4. And it told us how to label this one. That's what's nice about some of the application problems, because we're rounding it to the nearest 10 cubic inches, so we know what we're going to label with cubic inches. All right, so that's 3.14 times 9 times 20 divided by 4, which is 565.2 divided by 4 equals 141.3. Now this asks us to round it to the nearest 10 cubic inches. So we're rounding to the tens place, and that means 140 cubic inches. Now that's approximate. I think I'll put that V in there. So V equals 140 inches cubed. I'm going to go ahead and show that we rounded with our wavy equal sign. Okay, that's it for that one. All right, so on this one, it gave us two formulas. A jet engine developing T pounds of thrust and driving an airplane. A jet engine developing T pounds of thrust and driving an airplane at V miles per hour has a thrust horsepower H given approximately by the formula. And it gives you two. H equals one of them and V equals the other. It says find the airspeed V if H equals 16,000 horsepower and T equals 10,000 pounds. And so if we're finding V, then we want to use this formula. There's no reason for us to make it harder by using the other formula. So V equals 375 times H, which is 16,000, and then T is 10,000. So we multiply that out, which gives us 6 million. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to write those out with commas so we can see how many zeros there are. Right? And that actually means that without a calculator, we can kind of do some of this, right? This cancels this and the zeros. And so we end up with a volume of 6,000, and it's miles per hour. Not a volume, of an airspeed. V is volume to me so many times. V is for airspeed this time, and that's 600. Oops, I put too many zeros in there. 600 miles per hour. That doesn't show up quite as good because I marked out this one. Okay, so we don't want a comma in there either because it was not 6,000. All right, well, maybe I'll get less tongue-tied on the next video. So I'm going to stop the video here and then pick it up with the next example.